sort of data you can hold in databases. So databases can hold lots of different data types, and when you create your tables in your database, you're going to have to define which data type each column within that table can hold. And there's lots of different data types in MySQL, and most of them you'll never ever use or come across. So we're not going to look through all of them, we're just going to look at the most common data types and the most important data types. So first let's look at numeric data types, and the first data type we'll look at is int or integer, and this is for when you need to store whole numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4 or negative whole numbers as well. So a good example of a column which would hold whole numbers is an age column. So for an age column you'd use the int data type. And the next data type is the float data type, and this is when you need decimal numbers. So for example, if you're storing height, you'll need to use 1.78 meters, for example. So you have to use a float data type, and you'll have to define how long that number is. So if you want to store 1.78, then it's going to be length 3. So your m here will be 3. And then you also need to define how many numbers go after the decimal point. So for 1.78 you'll need 2. So for 1.78 you can use the data type float 3, 2. And then there's the decimal data type. Now this is almost exactly the same as a float, except you can see it's for precise decimal numbers, whereas float is approximate decimal numbers. So for a float, it will include rounding. So for example, if you only allowed 2 decimal places in a float, but you tried to enter a number like 625, then it's going to round that last number up to a 3, so 63. Whereas a decimal data type will not allow rounding, so you have to type only 2 numbers after the decimal place if that's what you've defined. So decimal data types are good for like price columns, so something's going to be $10.25. You can use decimal 42 for that. And next let's look at the non-numeric data types. So we can also store words or characters in database tables. So the first data type we'll look at is char, and this is for fixed length characters. So you use the char data type followed by a number, and any value you try and enter into that column will have to be that length. So if you had char 3, every single value in that column will have to have a length of 3. So example would be a currency column where you could have char 3 followed by USD, GBP, JPY, etc. And then the next data type is a varchar. Now this is for varying length characters. So again you define the varchar data type followed by a number, and it will be able to hold any string with a length up to that number. So if you said varchar 10, it could hold any string with a length up to a maximum 10 characters. So this is good for names, first names and last names, for example. So the next data type is the enum data type, and this is for holding values from a defined list. So you can see in the example here we've got enum and then mf. So this is for a gender column, so male or female, and you'll only be able to put either an M or an F in that column. It won't accept any other values, so you have to define which values this column can hold. So yeah, it's good for gender columns, or it's good for yes or no columns as well. And then the last non-numeric data type we'll look at is the Boolean, and this is for true or false values, so we can hold true or false. And this is good, for example, if you have a product table, you can have an in stock column, and that can be set to either true or false based on whether the product is in stock or not. And now let's look at date and time data types. So this is for storing date and time values. So the first data type is the date, and this holds just year, month, day. So this is good for date of birth columns. And then the next data type holds the date plus the time. So it holds year, month, day, but also holds hour, minute, second. So this is good if you have an orders table and you have the order time. So the time someone placed an order, you can hold this in a date time data type. And next is the time data type. So this holds hour, minute, second. So it's slightly different from the time in the date time data type, because this can hold a value which is more than 99.99 hours. So not just used for times of day, it can be used for the time between two events. So if two events took place more than 100 hours between, then you can use the time data type. And then finally we have the year data type, and this just holds year. So year. And this is good for things like a film release date. So the film released in 1985, for example.